Namaste. My name is Amish Tripathi, and I'm the director of the Nehru Centre in London, which is a part of the Indian High Commission in the UK. We are delighted to be hosting this first in a series of events to celebrate Swarnim Vijay Barsh, the golden year of victory of the Indian Armed Forces and the Bangladeshi Liberation Forces in the 1971 war, which was 50 years ago. We will explore various aspects of that war over a series of events that will take place through this year. And the first of it is being organized right now, which is on the naval attack on the Karachi port. Now, before I carry on with this, let me pull up my co-host up on stage, Commodore Srikant Keshnur. If you could bring him up here on stage, please. Welcome, Commodore Srikant. Thank you so much for gracing this Nehru Centre platform. And if I may read your introduction before we it doesn't look like he's put in 35 years in service, commanded 2 ships, done diplomatic as well as academic appointments as well. He holds 5 postgraduate degrees apart from a doctorate, a PhD. He has been the lead author and chief editor of 9 books for the Navy. That's as many books as I've written. And he's also among the most accomplished naval historians in India. What an honor to have you up on the Nehru Centre platform, Srikant.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Amish. Namaste and greetings to all the listeners. Indeed, wonderful to be here. As you brought out, 1971 is a memorable year for all of us, and particularly in the Navy, it was possibly our finest hour. The Indian Navy in that war fought in 2 separate geographic theaters, the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. The fleets established total sea control in both the places. We destroyed enemy ships and shore infrastructure. We were able to do lots of wonderful tactical measures which would probably come about in the series as we go along. Most importantly, we must not forget that the reason we had more than 90,000 prisoners of war is because the Indian Navy had blocked the escape routes for people going from East Pakistan to West Pakistan. So the final outcome had much to do with the way the Navy essayed this war. Now, of course, you talk about the naval attack on Karachi, and in many ways, that attack, while not the whole of the war, captured public imagination in a wonderful way. It marked the sort of audacity with which the Navy came to be characterized in that war. So we will talk more about this. Before that, I'd like to invite our Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral Commodore Singh, to say a few words so that we could flag off this event.
Excellency, Mrs. Gayatri Kumar, High Commissioner of India to the United Kingdom, Mr. Amish Tripathi, Director, Nehru Centre, London, esteemed panelists and attendees who have logged in from across the world, greetings. The 1971 Indo-Pak War was indeed a landmark event, which shaped the course of not just India's history, but also altered the geography of the South Asian subcontinent. The maritime facets of the war marked Indian Navy's coming of age and established its credentials as a force to reckon with. During the 71 war, the Navy executed an array of offensive and defensive operations on both our seaboards, effectively neutralizing the adversary's ability to use the seas for combat, sustenance, replenishment, and evacuation. The tactical ingenuity, employment of available combat power, and adroit planning proved crucial in supporting and shaping the land battle. The 71 war was most significant in that it led to the birth of a new nation, Bangladesh, a seminal geopolitical event. Though half a century has passed since this event, the core tenets of planning, decisive action, operational synchronization, and out-of-the-box thinking epitomized by naval operations during the 71 war hold true even today and carry valuable lessons for the future. The Indian Navy considers the operations conducted in 1971 historically and militarily significant, and for this reason commemorates the missile attacks of 4th December 1971 on Karachi as Navy Day. This six-part webinar will revisit key facets of maritime operations which charted the path to a comprehensive victory by the Indian Armed Forces. I understand that joint operational aspects which were central to the conflict would also be highlighted. While many operational facets have been immortalized through books and documentaries, listening to the first-person account of these historic events from those who were in the thick of combat would definitely go a long way in making this webinar special and valuable. I thank the Nehru Center and the High Commission of India, London, for conceptualizing and conducting this webinar series. As we celebrate Swarnim Vijay Varsh, the 50th anniversary of our fabulous victory in 1971, I'm sure that the series will kindle the interest of young maritime enthusiasts and, in effect, be a true homage to the personnel who served the nation valiantly and fearlessly. I consider webinars such as this as yet another step towards fostering maritime consciousness in India and the acknowledgement of India as a significant maritime nation. I wish the Nehru Center and High Commission of India, London, the very best in this fine endeavor. Thank you. Shauno Varna.
Thank you so much, CNS Admiral Karambir Singh. For the civilians among you who don't know, CNS stands for Chief of Naval Staff. Thank you so much for your very kind words, sir. And now, if I may request Her Excellency, the High Commissioner of India to the UK, Gayatri I. Kumarji, to say a few words.
Namaskar. It is indeed an honor to launch today the first in a series of webinars on the occasion of Swarnim Vijay Varsh as India commemorates the Golden Jubilee year of the victory of the Mukti Bahini and Indian Armed Forces in the 1971 war. That was a landmark event as it resulted in the liberation of East Pakistan and creation of the nation of Bangladesh, our cherished neighbor. The war of liberation of Bangladesh and India's role in it was just a natural response of a close neighbor to grave violations of human rights. It was reflective of the values of the Republic of India and our commitment to safeguarding the similar rights of our brothers and sisters in our immediate neighborhood. It is a moment to pay tribute to the heroism and success of the naval forces, the Indian naval forces who rose to the occasion and delivered in carrying out the mandated task in accordance with the highest standards of their training, capabilities, and valor. When we as Indians look back at the 1971 conflict, we take pride in some other important aspects over and above the comprehensive and decisive armed forces victory. Key elements that come to mind in this context are, firstly, the liberation of East Pakistan heralded the victory of democratic forces, the birth of a new nation, Bangladesh, which is today a thriving and flourishing democracy, is the most significant outcome of those operations in 1971. Secondly, given our common history, cultural linkages, and close people to people contacts and relationships, it was but natural that India should respond as it did to protect human rights, uphold justice, and respect for the electoral process. Thirdly, the victory of the 1971 conflict was also the triumph of values such as respect for language, cultural identity, a belief in peaceful coexistence, all deeply cherished in India and enshrined in the Indian constitution of the Bengali population and reinstitution of the primacy of the Bengali language and cultural identity to its rightful place in Bangladesh. These were, in our estimation, a major achievement of this operation. It was simply India's honest and no strings attached support for our friend and neighbor to achieve its legitimate aspiration. These were the non-military achievements of the 1971 operations. At the same time, it was the jointness of the Indian Armed Forces coupled with the bravery of the Mukti Bahini and the courage of the Bangladeshi people. It is this spirit that triumphed, which we have the honor to celebrate today. I would like to convey my thanks to all the eminent panelists and participants in this webinar. Chief of the Naval Staff, Admiral Karambir Singh, will flag off a webinar on the historic naval operation that was carried out by the Indian Navy on India's western seaboard at that time. High Commission of India, London, is particularly proud to have with us two veterans who had played a key role in that operation, Vice Admiral S.C. Suresh Bangara, Rear Admiral Sampath Gopal, and Commodore Inderjeet Sharma. They're now retired veterans, but all three of them were present at the forefront of the operations in Karachi in 1971. You will hear from them on that, and I thank them for joining these commemorations and giving us their first-person accounts. With these words, I once again welcome you all and thank you for your interest. Jai Hind.
Thanks, Excellency, for your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, the stage is now set for what should hopefully be a riveting discussion on Indian Navy's attack on Karachi in 71 war. As we said before, this attack characterized Navy's audacity and chutzpah, and today we have two eminent gentlemen, both who were a part of that war, to come and discuss the same with us. It's my proud privilege, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce Admiral Bangara. Vice Admiral Bangara, commissioned in 1966, trained on these missile boats in Russia, and then went on to become the executive officer of INS Veer, which took part in the attack for which he was awarded the mention in dispatches. Later, the Admiral commanded a missile corvette and an anti-submarine frigate before going on to become our defense attaché in the Indian Embassy at Islamabad, Pakistan. As a Rear Admiral, he looked after various verticals, the naval plans, the warship production and acquisition, but most importantly, he was in charge of information warfare and operations for a long time of almost 3 years. During this time, he also was the chief conductor of the Navy's operations in the Kargil War. He was later the flotilla commander as the flag officer commanding Maharashtra Naval Area. The Admiral, as a 3-star, was in charge of operations at the integrated headquarters, then went on to command the prestigious National Defense Academy at Khadakwasla before ending his career as the Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Southern Naval Command. After retirement, he has been extremely active, writing, reading, teaching, taking part in several webinars and seminars, and mentoring a lot of young people. Admiral Bangara was awarded the Param Vishish Seva Medal and the Ati Vishish Seva Medal by the Government of India. You will agree with me that we cannot have a better person than him to discuss the war in its micro and macro aspects. May I now call upon Admiral Bangara to please join us.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, sir.
Honor to have you on stage, Admiral Magara, sir. And it's my honor now to invite Rear Admiral S.R. Sampath Gopal, sir, up on stage, if you could be brought up. Honor to have you here, sir. Rear Admiral S.R. Sampath Gopal was commissioned in the Indian Navy in 1966. In 1969-70, he was selected to undergo training on OSA-class missile boats and its weaponry in the erstwhile Soviet Union. On return to India, he was appointed as Executive Officer, INS Nipat, one of the missile boats, as you'll discover more, one of the missile boats that led the attack on Karachi. Admiral Sampath Gopal, sir, has graduated from the Royal Naval Staff College, Greenwich, in UK, right here, in close to London. As a captain, he commanded the training establishment INS Chilka and destroyer INS Rajput. Sir, it might interest you to know I have some roots in Odisha as well, where Chilka Lake is. As Commodore, he was Director Naval Operations between 1991 and 93. He was promoted to flag rank in January 1994 and was appointed as an Assistant Chief of Naval Staff Operations. He took over as the Chief of Staff at the HQ Southern Naval Command in late 1994. He took over as Director General Project Seabird in April 1999 till his superannuation in April 2003. He was awarded the Nausena Medal for Gallantry in 1971 for Operation Trident, which we'll be discussing soon. And he was awarded the Ati Vishishta Seva Medal in 1999. What an honor to have such distinguished guests on stage on the Nehru Center platform. You've raised the prestige of our platform, sirs. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming here. And before we begin the conversation, sirs, you are all specialists in matters military, but many of the audiences and I, we are all civilians. We don't understand these matters as deeply as you do. So therefore, for their convenience, there is a short presentation that has been put together by Commodore Anil Jaggi, my colleague, the naval advisor in the High Commission of India to the UK, which will explain the battle that happened, the naval attack on Karachi, in simple layman terms, so that all of us civilians may also understand, in brief, what the battle was all about.
Let me provide you with the geographic, situational, and operational orientation of the naval operation in the Western Seaboard, which resulted in the successful attack on the Karachi harbour. To understand the planning factors for the naval operations, let us shift our attention to the Arabian Sea. Hostilities commenced on 3rd December 1971 when Pakistan launched a preemptive attack on Indian airfields. Indian Navy, which was prepared, immediately got into action for attaining sea control on the Western Seaboard. During this time in 1971, West and East Pakistan were two separate geographical entities separated by the Indian landmass of approximately 3,000 kilometers. The only means for the Western region to support the East Pakistan was therefore via the sea route around the Indian peninsula. Strangulating and preventing this support from west to east was therefore critical, and hence the importance of the naval operations on the Western Seaboard. Indian Navy's OSA-class missile boats of 25 missile vessel squadron were chosen for the operations due to their lethality, high speeds, small radar cross-section which prevented easy detection, and most importantly, the element of surprise. The ports which were relevant to the scenario and operations were Mumbai, where the headquarters of Indian Navy's Western Naval Command was located and the operations were planned. Port of Okha on the mouth of Gujarat, which was the forward naval base of Indian Navy, and of course, Karachi, which was the most important port city of West Pakistan and also the headquarters of the Pakistan Navy with its entire naval fleet based there. The distance between Karachi and Mumbai of 1,100 kilometers in comparison with the limited range and endurance of OSA-class missile boats of approximately 500 kilometers prevented the operations to be launched from Mumbai. An innovative and ingenious solution of towing and positioning the missile boats at Okha was therefore employed to bring Karachi Harbour within the reach for launching Operation Trident. On commencement of hostilities, Pakistan had also placed restrictions between dusk to dawn on all merchant ships from closing to less than 75 nautical miles or 140 kilometers from Karachi Harbour. For the Indian Navy Task Group, this was a blessing in disguise, as it meant that any unit which was detected within an arc of 75 nautical miles from Karachi during the period of dusk to dawn would therefore definitely be a Pakistani naval vessel on patrol. This was a crucial factor, and hence Operation Trident was planned to be delivered in the dark hours. In the darkness of the night of 4 December 71, the elegant and stealthy missile boats Nipat, Nirghat, and Veer, accompanied by Petya-class anti-submarine warfare frigates, Kiltan and Kachal, shaped course for Karachi Harbour. They were hugging the Saurashtra coast and maintaining strict silence and control on electronic transmissions. Once within 75 nautical miles from Karachi, the missile boats positioned themselves for attack. They were ready for the kill. Pakistani ships on patrol were detected between 10:30 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. on 4 December. And Pakistani destroyer PNS Khyber, Pakistani Navy's coastal minesweeper Muhafiz, and merchant vessel Venus Challenger were hit and destroyed by the surface-to-surface missiles of the missile boats and sent to the Davy Jones locker. The remaining missiles were launched on Karachi Harbour, and a minute before midnight of 4 December, the Kiamari oil tanks in Karachi were struck. Karachi was ablaze, and Operation Trident had dealt a crushing blow. Similar attacks on Karachi Harbour were launched on 8 December 1971 under Operation Python by missile boat Vinash, accompanied by frigates INS Talwar and INS Trishul. The damage caused in Karachi Harbour was so intense that the fire of the Kiamari oil storage tanks continued to rage for 7 days. The success of Operation Trident and Python prevented the Pakistani Navy from any interference or intervention in the Eastern Theatre. Rest, as they say, is history. Let's hear more of this in discussions. Jai Hind.
Thanks so much, Commodore Jaggi. That was a wonderful short overview of what transpired in Operation Trident and Python, the naval attacks on Karachi. So I think the stage is now perfectly set. We've had an overview. We had two people who took part in that very attack. So, sir, let me begin by asking a very, very simple question to both of you to sort of set the ball rolling. I wanted to ask Admiral Bangara, sir, you were young officers then, and there was probably some sense in the Navy and nation at that time about the war. So could you very briefly bring us up to speed on what was the spirit in the nation at that time, the spirit in the Navy? And if I can extend that to Admiral Sampath Gopal, sir, was there some sense of excitement, anticipation, apprehension about the war? How did both of you as young officers live through that moment and the excitement of that moment?
Well, thank you for your question, but I have to tell you that when we went to Soviet Union to pick up these boats to be trained there was no war on the horizon. There were a lot of problems, but there was no war. And as you well know, it was only after the elections in Pakistan of 1970 and the developments thereafter that the stream of people coming into India started. Over 1 million refugees entered India from erstwhile East Pakistan. That is when actually the tension was building up. Till then, yes, people thought there was a lot of instability, but the war part of it was not on the horizon till all this started. That is when, in any case, we were to get ready after we came back from from Vladivostok, our boats were brought by merchant ships and offloaded at Kolkata, because those days there was only one crane that could lift a size of about 200 tons. So we were all put in the water there, commissioned, and then we made our way to the West Coast. But we had, looking back with Vision 2020, when you always look back with Vision 20, it was Sam Manekshaw who bought us so much time, because he convinced the Prime Minister at that time that we need to prepare. We cannot, in April, things were bad. The refugee problems and our stand on what the world should do about it. All these discussions were going on, and Sam Manekshaw convinced the Prime Minister that we should delay this till we are ready, and also because monsoons would be setting in May, June, and that brought us more time. So we could then practice all the drills, and all these drills are very essential, as you know. So that gave us a full more than 6 months to prepare our action plans, but we had no clue on who was going to do when the balloon goes up. This was, as you know, is confidential. It's kept at Naval Headquarters. Planning is done. Discussions are held by the Western Naval Command, our operational authority. We had no clue who was going to do what. So during that period, all we knew was there was tension, and we were reading the same newspapers that everybody else was reading, and preparing so that we are ready. We did our practice firings and various other activities. So really speaking, that's nobody knew that's going to happen, but we even expected surprise attacks during Diwali of that year, and some of us were positioned in Oka, because we were meant to be defensive boat, not an offensive weapon. We were to guard Bombay, Oka, etc. The whole pattern was developed like that. I'll stop here and let Sam take over.
Yes, sir. Sir, Sampath sir, from the macro to micro, how would you describe the events on the ship and in the missile boat squadron?
Had a weapon which no other service had, a missile which Indian Navy itself did not have. The people were trained how to use it, how to handle it. So they were the entire ship's company, including officers, everybody, were gung-ho in wanting to use it and prove their capability. Therefore, the ship's company's morale was very high, and the training was, as Suresh mentioned, training went off very well. We were in rotation, attached with the fleet. We used to go out with the fleet ships and carry out exercises at sea. And the missile boat radar itself had a phenomenal capacity for long range detection. So we became, while being attached to the fleet, we became the eyes of the fleet, because none of the fleet ships had this capability of locating enemy warships at a long distance. So we were their eyes of the fleet, and we were used as eyes and also to carry out surprise offensive attack. We were under tow most of the time. They used to let go of the tow and tell us to go and attack, what we call a surface action group, SAG in short term. And the surface action group used to go attack, carry out attack, simulated attack on the enemy and come back. Mostly these were merchant ships on independent passage, innocent passage in the high seas. That's how the preparation went on. But to tell you in brief is that the morale, the capability, the training, the ship's company and the officers underwent was a very high order. To give one more example, while carrying out various trials at sea, Nipat had a mishap. Her forward gun, because of some faulty ammunition, the barrel exploded. So the squadron staff said that, "Oh, missile, you are out of operations now. You please stay back." At that time, ship's company felt very bad. Overnight, the entire barrel and firing units from the off mounting was changed to forward mounting, and the forward gun was made operational. That was the spirit with which the ship's company operated. With that, the squadron staff said, "Well, if this is the attitude, you should be definitely in the war." That's how we were there. That in brief should you tell you the enthusiasm, the training, and the preparedness of the ships that were taking part in the war.
What absolutely what soldiers! I mean, the men who defend India and their spirit and commitment. But Admiral Sampal Gopal sir, I thought used a very evocative phrase that they were the eyes of the Navy, but in some senses they were also the third eye because they opened it and destroyed a lot of the enemy, the adversary ships and facilities. So if I can serve as a civilian, because if I may put this to Admiral Bangara, the sheer concept of using a defensive platform as an offensive attack platform, the sheer innovation of it, because the adversary didn't expect it. These ships were not supposed to be off Karachi Port Harbour. They were supposed to be off Mumbai Port Harbour, defending Mumbai because they simply didn't have the range to travel all the way there. Take us through this brilliant innovation.
I'll have to take you back to the Soviet Union, because when we landed in the Soviet Union, all these were contracted much before. After the Chinese invasion, upgradation of the three services had to happen. And as a process of that, Admiral Chatterjee was then the chief. He signed all these deals with the Soviet Union. We had problems in the West. That's another story. So the Soviets stepped in and said, okay, we'll provide you all that. But none of us knew about the missile boats. Its capabilities are very defensive. So when we got there, because we were put on an island in a secret city of Vladivostok, we could not go to town without a boat, and the boats were controlled only on weekends. So
if I may, just for the civilians, just for those who don't know, Vladivostok is on the eastern coast of Russia, close to the Pacific. Sorry, sir, please. Sorry, sir, I may have to keep, because many civilians may not understand many things, sir. Sorry,
well, I'll say Siberia. They all know it.
Sorry, sir. Please carry on, sir.
So Vladivostok hadn't seen foreign trainee. They were training selectively, as you know, the non-Warsaw Pact countries. So Indians were the first from the Western training background who descended there. So we were, at that time, we had our submarines and a Petya class on the same island being trained. And we were a big contingent of about 200 people who landed up there. So since we were confined, bonding of the people and the crew took place. I want to take you back because none of these happened like a story, fairy tale. The preparation happens there. When the bonding took place, because we had language problems, they only spoke Russian. There was no English interpreter even. The temperature hit -32 in winter, something at sea we never see. The sea freezes there. These things shocked we couldn't believe what we were seeing. But the crew, the officers and men bonded more and more because we were fighting the language, we were fighting a new system of training which was not familiar to us. We were fighting the type of accommodation, inconvenience, all that. And so we bonded there. The true bonding took place there. And so when we came here, it was not like a new officers and men meeting each other for the first time. We had lived through hell, but we had time to focus on training. Now, if you were in London, for example, and you're getting a ship and evening hours, you're tempted to go out to town. There was no temptation here. So we sat and read our books over and over again. This new radar, this new missile, how does it work? They made us trace. Their training was superb, absolutely. They made us trace each part of the missile, each part of the radar. It was, you should know everything about the boat. So we had the time. We had the inclination because we couldn't go out. It was too bloody cold. And then we could then think about how to use these systems. That is where the thinking started. Can we use it against a shore target? It wasn't there in the books because the missile was not designed for that. It was designed to hit and sink a ship. And the Soviets were fighting the big carrier groups of the United States. So their weapons were that they would unleash these boats from multi-directions, do multi-directional attacks so that some missile will get through to the carrier and sink it. So we were trained in the tactics and so on, but we had discussions amongst ourselves and refined the documents. This couldn't have happened if I were not in Vladivostok, I can assure you. So that was the training ground. And that prepared us. And therefore, what you asked the question, what was the Jugaad, the famous Indian Jugaad was, because we were thinking about it, there were options available. We didn't know that the Navy would exercise those options. And as we come to the next step, we'll tell you how each of us got to know what we are doing only after the war started.
Sir, great. Before we go on to Trident and description of the Trident, which obviously we'll be asking both of you, Sampath sir, I just wanted to take off from where Admiral Bangara stopped about the training and how it built up a lot of josh and camaraderie and togetherness. Now, obviously, while this was sort of manifest in the way the tactics evolved, give us some sense of the way it spread amongst the sailors, the bonhomie and the sense of togetherness, so that when you went on your mission, I mean, we all know that it's ultimately the morale of sailors that counts. How did this help to build up the morale, and what was the morale on the ships vis-a-vis the sailors when you're going in for the attacks?
Like I mentioned to you and also Suresh brought up, we were in a group staying together in an island. There itself the relationship built up because we were playing together, we were almost staying almost together, except of course our dining and other living in facilities were different. But most of the time we were together, either in the same building, teaching in the classrooms or training. And when we came back to India, each ship had only about 30 sailors and 3 officers, or 4 officers, 30 sailors and 4 officers. And therefore, the bonding, the family feeling all within the ship itself, each one felt it is his ship. And that gave a tight bonding that served us a long way to go. The morale, as I mentioned, was very high. Nobody wanted to be left behind. The moment they heard you were going to be left behind, they were very depressed. So that feeling was already there. The ship's company were, like I said, gung-ho. They wanted to be there in front in the action. That was the feeling all over. And that is how the training configured itself, or the whole program went in that particular direction.
So, if I may then, sorry, Commodore Srikant, you had a question?
No, nothing. I think, in fact, you are now primed to ask them about Trident and how it happened. How now that you've built up the suspense, we could ask them how it unfolded.
The operation itself, because I mean the boats were towed to a forward base in Okha in Gujarat, so that because the boats didn't have the capacity to travel beyond 250 knots, and Karachi was much further away. So they were towed from Mumbai, then Bombay, to a forward base in Gujarat, and from there they carried on. So if you could take us through the first operation, sir, Operation Trident, which was hugely successful. We sunk many of the adversary ships, and we even hit the Karachi port.
Okay, let's put it this way, that Admiral Suresh already brought out that some of the missile boats were already deployed on the Saurashtra coast for forward defense and forward patrol. As far as Operation Trident was concerned, other than the fact that we were given the op order, which we opened it much later, we were told to sail out on the 2nd of December. And by then the fleet was at sea. By then some of the missile boats were already at Okha, and we were told to sail out on 2nd for forward deployment. So we came out of Bombay Harbor. We were told to up to south of Saurashtra coast, a place called Diu, and we were let off there. We anchored there for the day, and we were waiting. That is the time. That was on 3rd December. 3rd December through the day, we were anchored there. Then on 3rd December in the evening, the Prime Minister declared hostilities against Pakistan. based on the preemptive attack carried out by Pakistan on Indian airports or airfields. So we were asked to execute Operation Trident. At the time we opened the envelope, though the commanding officers knew about it, we opened the envelope and then explained to our sailors what is the next operation going to be. So we were, Nipat, which was, I was the XO Nipat, and Veer, XO Suresh, we were off due. We took off and we sailed towards Dwarka or Oka. Oka, Dwarka, slightly north of Porbandar, towards the northern tip of Saurashtra coast. We were to be joined by another missile boat, Nirghat, and en route we met up with Randu. We met up with Kiltan, which was on way to join us, and Kachal, which was also along with Nirghat, was at Oka. So the five of us, Kiltan and Kachal as escort ships, Nipat, Nirghat, and Veer, we assembled off Dwarka around the afternoon or 2 o'clock, I would say, on the 4th. The operation was to be executed on the 4th night, 5th morning, 4th, 5th night. The combined briefing was done. We were not to break any radio silence. So all this briefing, we came close to each other, was done using louder, so that nobody other than the hearing distance would have known what we are talking about. Thereafterwards, the task force commander itself was Captain Gopal Rao, who was CO Kiltan. Under his guidance, we made a loose single line formation, column formation as they call, and proceeded towards westwards. The operation was to be executed under the overall guidance of Captain K-25, Commander B.B. Yadav, who had also embarked Nipat. So around sunset, the ships formed into arrowhead formation. Nipat in the lead. On the port quarter was Nirghat. On the starboard quarter was Veer. Behind Veer was Kiltan. Behind Nirghat was Kach. We proceeded in that formation at the best speed. The aim was to arrive off Karachi post 10 o'clock, so that before midnight the attacks could be carried out and completed. That was the formation. That's how we went. And there was no radar usage permitted. No communication was permitted. All had been briefed and everybody knew what they were doing. Communication was only on the essential basis, absolute essential basis. That too using walkie-talkie or portable VHF systems. We proceeded, and around 10 o'clock in the night, we were about 70 miles south of Karachi. Around that time, we picked up a radar contact on the port bow, which was fairly fast-moving contact, and Nirghat was on the port side, and Nirghat was designated the target and told to carry out an attack.
Sorry, sir, if I may add one thing, what I was told was the Pakistani government had removed all merchant ships. They weren't allowing them in the night. So you were sure any ship moving out there would be an adversary ship. Is that correct, sir? You could just fire.
Well, we were to carry out an attack on any ship that was there, but I would not totally say that there were no merchant ships. Yeah, well, in the area of our approach, there were no merchant ships, though we did have a merchant ship, which I'll come to later.
Okay.
And Nirghat carried out an attack with one missile, which I'm sure Admiral Bangara will elaborate a little more. But Nirghat was the target still existed, still painted on the radar. So they were asked to carry out a second attack, and they did so, and the target disappeared. You could see the missile hitting the target and the target exploding, and we could see perhaps Nirghat was Nirghat himself, who carried out the attack, might not have seen the impact that what we saw, because when a missile firing takes place, they're all inside the bridge with all sides covered. They're only going by the radar and carrying out the attack. So thereafterwards, the units proceeded further, and Nipat picked up another contact right ahead, and this contact was designated for Nipat to prosecute. Nipat fired two missiles on that contact. Again, scoring a direct hit, the contact disappeared from the radar. That is the time Veer, another contact for the north, also moving in the westerly direction. So Veer was designated to carry out attack. Veer carried out the attack and sank that ship. We'll come to what these ships were little later, because at the time of carrying out the attack, we only knew we carried out an attack on a ship. We didn't know what ship, who was hit, who was sunk. All that came subsequently. And there were no other contact painting on the radar at that point from the southern approach to Karachi. And that is the time, based on the commanding officer's recommendation, Commander Kavina, the Captain K-25, the squadron commander, gave approval to fire one missile on the shore target. Much has been discussed whether we should use the radar or missile on shore target or not, because these are terminal homing missiles with terminal homing radar. The radar will pick up the most prominent object or most reflective object for the radar to home on when the radar gate opens. The radar gate itself will open only up to about 6 nautical miles from the target. Before that, so the question was whether we should fire. Since there are no other ships, let us fire one missile. We fired one missile, and we were very, very lucky. The missile did hit one of the tanks of Kamari oil fields and set it on fire, which would be seen. That is the time when the captain was ordered, or the squadron commander ordered task force to withdraw by using the code word Angar. So we all heard that and we withdrew and headed back. In between, while approaching on the return journey, ships had problems. We had a problem, serious problem with him while approaching itself. On the return, both Nirgat and all 3 ships, Nirgat, Nipat and Veer, had engine problems. But we managed to clear the area by dawn and come out successfully. Though we lost out on the formation, we lost out on the grouping, we independently moved away, independently came, we knew where to go, we came to Saurashtra coast and where we met up with each other. It is only when we came to Saurashtra coast, based on the radio message intercepted and what was broadcasted by Pakistani radio, that we came to know that PNS Khyber, a destroyer, was hit and sunk, and the merchant ship, Venus Challenger, which was carrying ammunition to Pakistan, was hit and sunk, and minesweeper Muhafiz was hit and sunk. These are the casualties that the Pakistan, and till that time, even at that time, the Pakistan did not know what attacked them, how they came under attack. They were all speculating it was an airstrike. But well, the missile coming from the air will look like an aircraft approaching them. But that was the report that they were under air attack, and that's how it came. We understand that the Pakistan Air Force did carry out surveillance in the morning to try and attack Indian units, but they could not locate any one of us and went back. That is basically Trident. We came back to Saurashtra coast. We refueled by the tanker who is already positioned there and took rest for the night. And next morning, early morning, we departed for Bombay on our own.
Fascinating.
Tanker was positioned to facilitate midway fueling. Like as Amish himself pointed out, that these boats do not have the capability, endurance to go from Bombay to Karachi and back. They could go from Saurashtra to Karachi and back. So they were fully fueled for taking off from Saurashtra coast till they came back to Saurashtra coast. Again, we were fueled at Saurashtra coast. We came back to Bombay. This is all very well planned and tactically arranged for us to refuel and come back.
Let me just answer Amish's question. I think that was relevant. Let's see the big picture now. because you know how we went, etc. Technical details will be forgotten or not even clear to people who are listening. But the fact is, we didn't know this. We were too young to know what's happening in Delhi. But now we know, because later we went back to Naval Headquarters. You know how things are done. Sampath was Director Naval Operations. I was Assistant Chief later. So you see the big picture. There was a fleet at sea. The Western Fleet was at sea. They had 2 missile boats being towed with them. So the aircraft, the Pakistani maritime surveillance was locked on the Western Fleet. They knew there were 2 boats being towed and they kept marking them throughout. So the attention was the 2 boats are with the Western Fleet. So they were expecting an attack from further west. So, you know, and the next question you'll ask me is, how come if you could go from Oka to there, hit and come back, there were already 2 boats there. Why didn't they go? Why did you have to tow 2 people from Bombay?
Right.
That's the beauty of the whole planning process. Surprise element apart, when the focus was on the Western Fleet, there were obviously number of attacks had been planned. Nobody knew the war is going to be terminated in 15, 16 days, that Bangladesh will be liberated. I mean, these things were not on the card. So they had planned for a prolonged war and many other attacks from other directions. So the fleet was one. Now, all people were focusing, and the human intelligence aspect of Oka is very strong. There are people who can be watching and reporting directly what they see. So Oka was under surveillance, human intelligence as well. So everybody knew when a missile boat went out and came back. Another ship came and they knew, but they didn't know about this lot coming in the night. We were told through the night. So when we left harbor, the chief of staff came to give me the orders because both our commanding officers were being briefed at the ops room. We were just berthed in. And he, since I was his staff officer, he was the chief of staff, but moved out from K-25 when we came back. He had a special, connection with me because in Vladivostok, we worked very hard together. I was a young officer doing all the running around. So he gave me the orders and said, you won't be opening this till you're at sea. But he just turned around and said, and this I've recorded somewhere, to say, where are your parents now? So I said, where are your belongings kept? So I said, it's in the mess. So he said, well, you just give me he was trying to imply that you may not come back, which was perfectly okay. If we were sacrificed in the attack, that was part of the plan, because they expected a lot more hostilities off the harbor than anywhere else. So it is quite possible air attack could have been done early in the morning. Night capabilities were limited on both our sides, but they expected some of us to be casualties. So then I knew we are going somewhere, so I just smiled because I was a bachelor, had no, attachments other than the parents. So I just said, thank you, sir, you're very kind, and take care of, whatever you have to do. And that is when I got a hint that when we opened, it's only when, as Sampath said, that night we got towed by survey ships who are not normally marked, as you know. So we got connected, we got towed, and when we eventually opened the orders, the sequence was given, where to go, and that is when we were told to call the sailors and inform them. So the surprise element of it didn't, for many years, we didn't understand because we never exchanged notes. It is now that I've grown in service and I'm looking back, I can see the 3 different plans, and the second attack I'll be discussing later. We did it on the 4th night. The second attack was on the 8th. So, and they were 3rd, and there would have been a 4th. That's the reason we refueled and went back to Bombay, because the missiles had to be loaded only in Bombay. Quite big to be lifted by crane and loaded. So we had to go back to Bombay. We couldn't have loaded missiles in Oka those years. Now we have perhaps some facilities.
Yeah.
So that's
Before I hand the question to you, Srikant, if I can just say from a civilian perspective, what are these men who know we are probably not coming back? and there's no second thought in their mind. There's nothing. Just, I guess there's a reason why so many of us civilians look up to you, armed forces personnel. I mean, you're built of better metal than we are. But Srikant, over to you.
Amish, I want to correct you there. We are trained for something, and we are trained over and over again. And I can tell you, during the war, we have no time to think about whether we are going to come back or not. We are so focused on our drills. So it's not that we are great heroes or anything. We just do our jobs as we were trained.
It takes a true hero to say I'm not a hero. Srikant, please. Sir.
No, I think what Admiral Bangara and Admiral Sampath Gopala brought out very fascinating details, and some things that come out is have the big picture. You don't know how long the war will last. Second, the element of surprise, having to do everything and taking care to ensure that surprise. That's very, very important. There are macro elements to it and micro elements to it, but keeping that. Also, fortune favors the brave. It is not that they did not have breakdowns, they did not have problems, but because they dared to go. I mean, even they did not probably realize the impact. But can you imagine on the first day of the war, so to speak, on the fourth night, you have hit 3 ships of Karachi, 2 of their naval ships, 1 merchant ship, and you have hit their harbor. So it's a kind of opening big knock that is that forces the opponent to stagger back. So that's the kind of thing that this surprise achieved. So truly, and like both of them said, it is more training, the Josh, not a single sailor. Commodore Jarrett's book brings out that. Commodore Sharma's recollections bring out that when you ask the sailors, not a single one wanted to get back. Everyone wanted to be there and to do it. So that, I think, this might be a good point. We'll come to Python rendition a little later, but could we have Commodore Indrajit Sharma's views about Trident, since he was the man who sort of set the war? He fired the first missile. We could hear him.
In 1971, I was on board INS Nirgat, which I was commanding, was based in Oka before the war, as in the advanced base. In fact, 2 ships were there, INS Nirgat and INS Vidyut. But it so happened when the actual time of the attack came, INS Vidyut developed some technical problems. She could not sail, whereas I sailed out and joined the main fleet, which was commanded by Admiral Kurvela at that time. Then on the 4th and 5th night, 2 other ships, that is Kiltan and this Kachal, they joined us. And then we had the missile boats, Nipat and this Veer. So the formation of Trident, as they call it, 3 missile boats ahead. Nirgat, Nipat was the first ship where the squadron commander Babruban Yadav was there, and we are on the right. And 2 Petias, that is Kiltan and Kachal, they were guarding the rear. So on the 4th, we attacked Karachi harbor. It was the night of 4th and 5th night, right, when we attacked Karachi. And it so happened with me that I got a contact battle destroyer, PNS Khyber. I reported to my squadron commander, Babruban Yadav, who was leading this attack, that I got a contact on my port side, permission to attack. Otherwise, he will be encircling us. He said, approved. So I took off from the formation, went to the port side, and reduced the range with that ship which was attacking us, was trying to come and attack us. So I had my first missile. That is starboard side hangar first. And that missile went and hit the target there. And I reported to squadron commander, target hit, but still afloat, not sunk. Permission to launch a second missile, but his speed is reduced. So I went in again, closer range, and fired the second missile. The second missile hit the target directly once again and ripped her apart in 2 pieces, and she sank after that. There must be some survivors floating around there, but nobody went to pick them up. Nipat fired 3 missiles into Karachi and Veer fired one missile. And by the time I finished the attack and joined the fleet again, that is the attack force, we got the order of finishing the attack called Angar. And so we didn't attack anything, we came back. And that was it. And we came back, and we came back to Bombay after the attack. They were received by the CNC and other people, the heroes welcome. And great attack. And that really shook Pakistan, that we had gone to their citadel and attacked them there. And they are really shaken. And then immediately after some time, we were charged again with 2 more missiles. And we were being deployed against by the 14th or I think 15th of the same month. But on the way itself, when we were going towards Oka once again, the hostilities and the war was called off. So instead of going to Oka, we went to this Porbandar and stayed there and came back to Bombay. And that was the 1971 war. My major learning for the Navy was to lead a very disciplined life. Once a task was given to me by the Navy to do this, and it was my duty, or you can call it, or by my nature you can call it, that I really went for it in everything which I had, right? Whatever tasks were given, maybe a deployment in Park State, anti-smuggling patrol, or whatever have it, but which was given to me, then I did it with great efficiency and great keenness and great dedication. And because of that, I got recognitions, So was the case on board INS Nirgat also. Missile boat it was, but then we went for the attack. I had forgotten everything when I was attacking, right? My family, my children. Up to a point it was there, uske baad mein kuch nahi. It was nothing else but me and the target, the battleship, PNS Khyber. I had to attack it. I knew it, that they are going to die, all of them, if I hit them, right? But then what could I do? Attack was an attack. It was a question of either he survives or you survive. If I had not attacked, let's say the battleship destroyer, they would have attacked us and we would have been sunk with one hit only. So it was a question of doing it first and do it well. As we say that hit first, hit hard, and keep hitting. That's the motto of the gunnery officers. This action of attacking Karachi was recognized by the Navy, and I was awarded Veer Chakra.
So, you heard it virtually from the horse's mouth. So, what I would now request, Amish, we could move on to Python and then come back to a few common issues. And while we tried to get Commodore Jareth, unfortunately, we couldn't. He's a little unwell. But he wrote a book, and Admiral Bangara and he exchanged huge amount of notes at that time. So Python, I think Admiral Bangara knows what happened. And one of the things that I want to ask him, sir, you mentioned about different direction of attack. And I think one of these big factors of surprise was that while you launched Trident on the 4th from south and more east, the Python came in from west across from the Makran side. And again, Pakistan was caught sort of napping. And he fired all 4 missiles that got a hit. So could you sort of take us a little bit through Python and the cumulative impact of both these operations? Looked in retrospect, I guess you wouldn't have realized it then, but looked in retrospect, can you tell us the cumulative effect of both of these?
You're absolutely right. When we finished all the attacks and no damage to any of our boats, all of us were back, we didn't exchange notes on who's doing what, because this element of secrecy was so high that we wouldn't open our mouth on what we did. So when Python came back, that is when Jareth came back after the attack, he didn't talk about his attack. We didn't tell him what we did in none of our business. We never asked this question. It's a fact. Now, 2 boats were put with the Western Fleet with the purpose of, because the gun ranges were limited, as you know, even if the cruiser had gone, he couldn't have engaged Makran coast or whatever it is. So they realized that 2 missile boats there would do the trick either before or after. The 4th was, I think, very clear in their minds. First attack was clear. The second one was flexible because they had to close And every time in the daytime they closed, the aircraft would come up, the Pakistani maritime surveillance aircraft would come up. Once you're seen, then you alter course. In the night, they tried to close. And on the 7th, which was the date given to Python to strike again, Python didn't know the total damage we had done. I mean, the fleet commander might have known through signals from Delhi. Delhi was absolutely gaga because they didn't expect so much of damage on one attack. The very first ship sunk by Ajay Sharma, 300 people died in that. They couldn't have recovered anybody. And much later, I met the Pakistani chief who was commanding one of the ships at that time. So much later, I was on track too, so I can piece this together. So when the actual Python, when they tried to launch on the 7th, 2 ships were escorting Jareth and
yes.
Vinash. Now, those 2 ships were there, both Talwar and Trishul. So he had an advantage we didn't have. We were to keep 1 missile in reserve for a return passage because we didn't know who will come from where during a return. So that was in our orders. Whereas he was with the Western Fleet. So he didn't have to seek assistance from anywhere. He would quickly go and get fuel, whatever he wanted from the fleet. So he had the liberty to use all his missiles if required. And secondly, the first day he attempted, the weather was bad. Because the weather is extremely bad, the launch becomes a problem. So they called it off. And on 8th, eventually, they were closing, and Trishul and Talwar escorted Vinash. And as they were closing, there was a Pakistani trawler, which was an intelligence ship. He spotted them and he started signaling, which was picked up by Trishul, and they decided to sink that ship with guns because, that was enough to sink him. So they sank that trawler, they continued, and when eventually Vinash was let off by Trishul and Talwar to attack, Pakistan had withdrawn all their ships. Warships were all bottled up in Karachi because they knew any ship outside would be sunk. There's only one warship.
They were scared. So they were they were scared, just to explain to the civilians. Okay.
I would like to say, because, we give them respect, and being, when you're adversaries, you always respect every adversary. So I would say they took a protective measure because they knew anybody out, if the damn missile boats could come from nowhere, they didn't know what's going to happen next. So the safest was to get them into harbor. One ship they could not get into harbor, their tanker, because he had to be defueled, so that the ship could go into shallower water. And that is the fellow who was at anchor. He got it first, and then he continued firing at the harbor. So Diwali was started by us on 4th of December after Diwali, actual Diwali. And when this happened, his fleet commander made a signal, or his tactical commander made a signal saying this is the best Diwali we have seen, because they could see everything aflame. So that was the second attack. And now I know there could have been a third, there could have been a fourth, but there was just not enough time.
Fascinating.
So, to expand a little more, the first missile fired by Vinash was on the shore target. First missile was on Commodore.
Okay.
The second and third missile were on merchant ships anchored outside. And the fourth missile was on Dhaka, PNS Dhaka.
Yes.
PNS Dhaka, being a warship, managed to survive. Out of the 2 merchant ships, 1 merchant ship sank, and the other got severely damaged. So the casualty of Vinash.
I think Amish raised a good point. Was there? Yes, Pakistan had issued a warning to shipping. We all do that. We identify a war zone and say, don't enter this. You enter at your own risk. So their merchant ships had to come in because they were carrying ammunition. They were carrying war material for them. So they had said, don't enter at night. But that was on the very first day. All ships may not have read it clearly. That's how they got trapped in our attack.
Right.
Otherwise, only warships would have been patrolling. But that didn't happen on 4th. But later, it happened because they withdrew everybody. Only merchant ships were out. The reverse happened. So you're right, they had one.
In fact, the Indian Navy declared
Yes,
Karachi
That is-
Harbor. Huh?
yes, yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Indian
Yes.
Navy had declared Karachi Harbor out of bounds for all blockade, as we call it, for all
Yes.
naval ships, merchant naval ships. Anybody entering Karachi or approaching Karachi Harbor had to take the approval of the Indian Navy before they can enter. That is the rule as per the maritime law. So the question of anybody entering there was not possible. And those who were already there remained there because they could not get out because they had to take Indian Navy's permission. That is how the merchant ships which were there got trapped by the second attack.
Fleet, they were, keeping a lookout for any ship going to Karachi. The Western ship actually boarded and brought some ships back also, I think. They were carrying ammunition for.
Fascinating.
So Amish, essentially, if I can sum up, what happened is that after the attack on 4th, most of their ships came in. So like what Admiral Bangara said, defensive protective measure. After the destruction on 8th, they in fact ordered the ships to de-ammunition. So in a sense, within the first 4 days of the war happening, more or less, they had given up, probably they had given up their will to fight on the surface maritime fleet in the West. And
Yes.
as Admiral Sampath Gopal says, when we said that everyone must take permission from us to enter, and the merchant ships complied with that, essentially, psychologically, you had strangulated Karachi and held sway over the waters of the North Arabian Sea. So this is the cumulative effect of these two attacks. Yeah, so I wonder if maybe we are running out of time. So could you ask them one, or as you feel, but one last question to both of them before we call our guests, or you think we
Sure.
have more time?
No, I think we have time, but perhaps if I can ask, I'm from what Srikant said, that the overall impact, what Commodore Srikant said, that Karachi was the main port and West Pakistan was their hub. In fact, it was the only naval and commercial port. If we in effect blockaded it, we severely impaired their war effort. They couldn't replenish East Pakistan. Their navy had almost given up. They weren't coming out and even battling our ships. So, if you can take us through from a strategic perspective, that what was the impact of that and how backbreaking was this to their war effort? Did this aid close the war so rapidly within just 14 days?
No, actually, when you go into war, you always have a termination aim. When will you terminate an action? That should be laid down. In our case, it was straightforward: liberation of Bangladesh, or the East Pakistan to Bangladesh. So once that was achieved, and when you do the other action on the East Coast, all this will come out. When that was achieved, there was no point in continuing the war. So 15, 16, I think they terminated because Bangladesh was liberated. So it was not that we were going to starve Karachi. War aim was that.
Okay.
So the carrier was there, the Eastern Fleet was there, a lot of air attacks, you'll come to know, not only Air Force, but the naval aviation took part, hell of a lot on the East. So that was the war termination aim of the war. So when you have a good cause, in this case, to make sure that so many migrants who came in and they were taken care of and returned, that was the cause that we were fighting for, and liberation happened on it, because you will see there was a lot of activity which was more than just these operations. I'm sure Kesnur will lead you on to the phase 2, phase 3, OPEX, all that. Yes.
We'll do so.
We'll do that. If we could bring our guests up on stage, Srikant, with your permission.
Yeah, certainly. Amish, just 30 seconds. I'm fascinated by what Admiral Bangara said, that when you're fighting the right moral cause, and I think that's very important here. We were fighting the good cause. That's something you as a novelist will, of course, instinctively understand, relating to the mythologies and legends that you write about. Also, another small point that you can use, a nice piece of information that Admiral Sampath Gopal gave, that the Trident started with the assembly of Dwarka. So next time when you write something about Dwarka, remember this sort of postmodern addition to your legend. Now we can get the guests back.
No,
We
no,
can
very,
get it.
very, very true. And if I can add even more to the moral thing to all three of you, many people today are not aware of what happened in 1971 and the crimes that were committed on East Pakistan by the then West Pakistan Army, the Bangladeshi genocide, millions were killed, millions came as refugees. Those were terrible war crimes. Many got away with those war crimes. So therefore, it was a moral fight as well. This is so true. India did the moral thing in helping our friends, Bangladesh, the Bangladeshis, to get liberation from the oppression and horrific oppression that they were suffering at the hands of West Pakistan.
Yes.
If we can bring our guests up on stage, sir, we have invited a few who will ask you live questions. The first one on stage is Tia. If she could be brought up, please go ahead, ma'am. If you can ask your question and if you could specify who you are asking it to.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, sir. I would be asking my question to Sampath, sir. So it would be really interesting if you could tell us possibly an exciting or something like a lesser known fact about Operation Trident, like the operational details, and also how it was when you came back to Mumbai after the attack, and like how you were received, and how did you all savor the victory after the attack? So yes, that's my question.
Well, the first part of the question is that Operation Trident itself was a very, very surprise attack on the Pakistan. And we were very well prepared for that because we had carried out similar exercises with the fleet ships when we were attached to the fleet, going and carrying out attack on enemy targets. So it was a very well rehearsed attack and we were very well prepared for it. And our training and our practice yielded in fruitful result. And as regards coming back to Bombay was very, very exhilarating because there were few ships of Bombay. They were carrying out patrol of Bombay. They were told that we are coming back because they had to be warned that our own ships are coming, not to carry out any attack on us. And they had prepared in full. Their entire ship's company was on their deck, cheering us all the way when we came. Inside the harbor itself, the CNC himself was present at the jetty to receive us, and each one of us were given a hero's welcome with 3 joys being shouted by all the ship's company which are there. That was a very, very proud moment for us, very exhilarating and proud moment to be back with a thumping victory. You all watch cricket match, when India wins, how exciting it is. It's like that. It was very exciting for us. The youngsters will feel very proud to have such a reception at Bombay.
Our next guest.
Can I just add
Yes,
one
sir.
thing?
Yes, sir.
Madam, I want to tell you, when we came back, of course, everybody was cheering us, but what were we doing? We were loading. We were loading missiles, and there were air attacks expected of Bombay. So the siren would go off now and then of an air attack. Somebody sees a light somewhere, and whole of Bombay, the guns were firing and so on. So it wasn't that we were resting. And those who, I think, our commanding officer wanted to quickly go and see somebody who was ill at home, he stepped out. We had to be in uniform at all times. And the taxi driver had one look at him and said, I will not charge you. I will just accompany you, drop you wherever you want. Yeah, I mean, people did not take money from us. They would, say, offer food, So that was the mood. Yes.
I must also tell you one more. We were till then called 25th Missile Boat Squadron. After the 4th attack, it got changed. We became K Squadron, Killer Squadron. The 25th Missile Boat Squadron.
Yeah, my cap.
Killer Squadron.
That's
After
a killer
the
squadron.
The second thing that's important to Navy, Indian Navy all along celebrated 15th December as the Navy Day. It was after 1971. 4th December became the Navy Day. So these are all done in honor of the attack carried out by the Navy on 4th December. So we all feel proud and be part of such a Navy.
So Tia, I think that answers, in a sense, the killer saga was born from 1971 when they came back, and it's something that still stays in subsequent incarnations, something that we look up to, and it's a huge honor to serve on the killer boats and all that they sort of represent. I think also what Admiral Bangara said is important. It ain't over till it's finally over. So you only celebrate when the war is done and dusted. You don't count your victory before that. So I think with that, we go to the next guest, Arun Yadav. Arun, are you there? I believe you have a question. Can you go ahead and ask your question, Arun?
Yes, sir. Very good afternoon to all the panelists here, sir. Firstly, I must say I'm very privileged to be here, sir, because I've lived through the legacy of 1971 war as an electrical officer on board INS Vidyut, sir. So, and I have lived through this, and I totally understand the difficulties of those times, sir. So, being an electrical officer, sir, I would like to basically ask a question to Admiral Bangara, sir. Sir, we inherited a lot of British technology post-independence. Until about 1965, we had a lot of British technology, almost 80% of it. And suddenly, post-65, as you mentioned, we started inducting a lot of Russian technologies as well. So my question is, what are the challenges in adapting to these technologies and incorporating them into our tactics?
Okay.
Sir, as a joke, if I may, sir, we are part of the Indian High Commission to the UK. Diplomacy. Sorry,
yeah.
sir.
Yeah. See, we were completely Western oriented, you know that. So in the 60s, 62, 63, we had Vikrant. Then we had the Bs and the Ts. And, that 4.5 system was the latest at that time, fire control system, So that's all we knew. I mean, most of the country officers who came with us, they knew those systems well. Now, the Russian system, I'm writing separately on it. You'll probably get a copy of it after it's published. That's not for outside. They had a conscript system. Conscripts manned the junior levels of the ship, sailors, 3-year compulsory training, and they just hated it. They just waited to go home, 3 years. The actual ships were run by the petty officers and above, and the officers. Officers were very nearly user maintainers, because when they went into a type of ship, they stayed there for years and years and years. Commanding officer will hear the noise of the engine and say, this has happened to the engine. Years of experience. So they have following a user maintainer system. We had electrical branch, and on the ship, there was no electrical officer in the old boats. So EARs and, we had sailors manning everything. What surprised us, as even the seamen who were pretty, in academic terms, pretty outdated, or they picked up, because they had to answer questions in the classroom. And the Soviets were not going to clear you till you passed all the exams. So we were amazed to see the levels to which they rose. So we adapted, but we had to change. And then for the next 20 years, we grappled with the user maintainer concept, and we are still grappling with it, right? So that was a huge, huge impact on us. We learned to convert very rapidly. And there's a long story. One-on-one, we can talk about it one day.
Wonderful. If I may, thank you. I hope that answered your question,
yes, sir.
Arun and Admiral Sir. If we could have one more live guest coming up on stage to ask you a question. If Meera Badre could be brought up on stage, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you, Nehru Center, for helping us relive the vivid memories of the 1971 war. I think celebrating the Swarnim Vijay Divas, rather Vijay Varsh on this platform, it has given us viewers and listeners a sort of a vicarious thrill, I should say, of one of the most audacious missions conducted by the Indian Navy. I have two questions, one for Commodore Kesnur and the same question for both Admiral Bangara and Admiral Sampath. Sir, Commodore Kesnur, for you, you've joined the Navy much after the 1971 war. You've completed 35 years now. In what manner does your generation view or perceive this naval war and this missile boat attack? And my question to Admiral Sampath and Admiral Bangara is very personal, but I think you might oblige. Families make the backbone of any armed forces, you know that. It would be very nice to know any striking memory or any particular reaction of your family members pre-war and post-war. Thank you so much. Thank you.
How would you like it to go, sir? The seniors first?
You lead the way. Okay, so the first question is yours.
Right, sir. Right. Thanks, Meera. Thanks for reminding how old I am with my years in the Navy. But look, when I joined the Navy, these missile boats were still in commission, and they used to be berthed at a particular place within the naval dockyard, which, I mean, it was holy to us. By that time, in mid-80s, the Navy had acquired the SNFs, the Godavari class had come in. 1 year later, the aircraft carrier Virat came in. But I think there was a sense of awe, a sense of aura associated with the missile boat people. I've sort of written about this in an article on them. The places where they stayed, it was 15 years later, they stayed in the mess, but there was a palpable sense of excitement, of respect that you had for the entire squadron. And I think all of us, and by the time we got into service, the second generation of the killer boats came in, and each one of us wanted to serve. I mean, if you can ask me, one of my regrets is that I have not been a part of the killer squadron. That is the sort of legend and aura that the missile boats had. At a larger level, as a Navy historian, I think they gave us, as I said, our finest hour. They made us walk proudly. They made us feel so great about the Navy subsequently, because remember that we didn't get much of a chance in 65. Goa was a limited war. So the Navy came to party later, but we came with a bang. So I think this generation of Admiral Bangara, Admiral Sampath Gopal, and all of them who took part in that war, and particularly the missile boats, like I said, the killer saga was born. They gave us much to feel proud about, much to treasure, and the legacy to take it further. I think what happened on the 4th and 8th of December is ingrained into our collective psyche, and it's there in our psyche, and it's something that we feel so proud that we don't hope that there are wars again, but if there are, we hope we stay true to their legacies and carry it further. I think that's what my generation feels about them and that war.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, very quickly, the fiery crucible of battle is not that experience is not there for decades together. You might have a war and then you have a break to the next, 20, 30 years maybe. So there hasn't been a full-scale war since 71, right? We have got skirmishes. So that we were fortunate to be in when we were very young. As insofar as when we went to the Soviet Union itself, married officers had no contacts with the families because we were on an island, and any letter we wrote back home took about a month, because they had to go buy a bag which the Indian embassy would pick up, by sending somebody, and nobody wanted to come to Vladivostok anyway from Moscow. It was a much more, interesting place. They would rush there every week. So they would pick up the bag and it would go. There was no question of telephones. They were just not affordable because we were paid so badly, and we couldn't make calls at will from the So therefore, contact with the family had become minimum. Even people having babies born, somebody dying, all became normal part of our life there. We got to know somebody is ill 1 month later, right? So they had got tuned to it. The families had got tuned to it. Not to a war. Now, I was a bachelor, so was Sam. We were not married. But when our parents had assumed, all is well, they're gone to this. But when the war broke out, they knew nothing till we came back and made contacts. They really didn't know anything about what is happening. So that pressure was not there. That married officers, of course, is to feel sorry for them because they would, want to communicate. But that was accepted as part of the duties. That's it.
Thank you, Admiral Singh.
Sirs, if I may, if there's one more question, I mean, we're getting a lot of comments, from our audiences, but there is a question. First of all, thank you so much, Meera. Lovely question.
I have to add, as much as you are a spectacular author, you are a spectacular virtual host as well.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Meera. Sir, we are getting various comments from from our audiences, but there's one particular question that's come up. It's come from Prashant Kumar. If I could ask that to Admiral Bangara and Admiral Gopal. Prashant, he says he's a civilian, but he has done some research that apparently Pakistan did do an airstrike on our Okha forward base in Gujarat, and apparently they ended up striking their own ships. Is this true, and what is the story?
Well, on the morning of 5th, Pakistan did carry out surveillance of aircraft, and from what we understand from the intelligence report, is that they found some patrolling crafts off south of Karachi, and they presumed it was our boats and carried out an attack. This is what we have also heard from intelligence report. We have no first-hand knowledge on that. Suresh, being innate to Pakistan.
When the war ended, and I think Sampath didn't explain that part, we all had orders that we would not come together back. We were given different directions to split, so that nobody could prejudge what entry we are making where. So I had a route to follow. He had a route to follow. So we were not supposed to meet at all till next morning. But we had an engine problem. So we were stopped dead in the water. So we had to make up for time. So I changed that and took a shortcut back to this tanker. It's a dumb barge actually with fuel, Poshak. We had to just meet that fuel, otherwise we were all starving. So when we took the shortcut, the Pakistani Air Force flew over us the next morning. And because we were not doing high speeds, there is no wake. Wake is what the propeller leaves. Because we're doing slow speeds, it looks like a fishing boat from up there. They flew over us. Okay. They dropped something in Okha. I think that's recorded. And then what Sampath said happened. On the way back there, oh, that's it. And they attacked their own patrol boats. Yeah, that's what we gather. I also
Sorry, I know the armed forces look at this seriously, but thank you, Prashant, for bringing out this thing, which we civilians would find a little funny that they attack their own boat.
Amish, if I can sort of, slightly add to this, like both the admirals said, this is what intelligence indicates. There are some reports that they hit PNS Zulfikar. There are also some reports that they didn't go out to rescue for a little while. Yes. I mean, they delayed it because they were unsure about the kind of attack. They were expecting more. Now, the bigger lesson in all of this is what was brought out earlier, that if you hit hard offensive action, you induce a sense of panic in your opponent. So he doesn't know how to react. And that panic leads to lots of unforced errors. Now, how much is the extent of the unforced error? What really happened? Ultimately, it might come out years later. But all of those little pieces add up to sort of debilitate the morale and force you even more back than what purely the physical impact of attack is. So I think Prashant has a point there that cumulatively this results in a bit of what we call the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, act loop. I think the Indian OODA loop was faster and the opponents were paralyzed in their decision making, and that's another thing that this attack achieved.
Also, fog of war happens in war.
The fog of war.
Absolutely fair. Thank you so much, Admiral Bangara, Admiral Sampath Gopal, Commodore Srikant, for honoring the Nehru Center stage with your presence. And before I, conclude the program, I would like to thank Admiral Pawar, who is retiring on this very day, on the 31st of May, without whom this program wouldn't have been possible. For the civilians among you who don't know, Admiral Pawar is the Deputy CNS, the Deputy Chief of Naval Staff. And all Godspeed to you, sir, and thank you for making this program possible. I think one thing that can be acknowledged, that the Swarnim Vijay Varsh, the Golden Jubilee year, is not just a commemoration of the 50th anniversary of that war. It is in many ways a golden year because it was golden. India suffered the blows of fate at that time. Our neighbor, what became Bangladesh, and at that time East Pakistan, was suffering. Refugees came to India, but the country got together. The armed forces stepped up to the plate, and we fought fate and our adversary and emerged victorious. And this is particularly resonant in today's day as well, when India is facing a very, very difficult time, a very difficult adversary, an invisible adversary in the form of a virus. And our entire country needs to come together, needs to fight unitedly, so that we can emerge once again as a strong nation out of these very difficult times. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you. And we'll have many, many more such events celebrating the Swarnim Vijay Varsh.